Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us as we kick off our 2021 webinar series. I'm Denise, and with me is QAD and MRP expert, Don Lindsey. Please know that everyone connects to the webinar already muted, but feel free to type in questions or comments at any time throughout the session. Enter them into the control pane at the bottom where you see that red arrow pointing, and then during the Q&A, we will address questions in the order received. Also, as you exit the session, a very brief survey will pop up automatically. We ask only 2 questions and provide a field for comments. It's very quick, but it is very helpful. So we do hope you'll provide us with some feedback today. And what to expect. As soon as the replay of today's session is published, each of you will receive our encore email. It's a big blue button you see there. We'll link directly to the replay. As with all of our communications, upcoming webinars will be listed at the bottom of the email. And finally, the main event. Here is just some of the experience Don Lindsey brings to the table. So let us learn from instructor extraordinaire.
Good morning, and thank you, Denise, for that nice introduction. Over the last several months, we've had the opportunity to look at many different aspects of QAD's ERP system, from purchasing to MRP, to inventory, service, and support. Last month, we looked at changes brought about by the COVID pandemic and disruptions. Today, I'd like to look at one aspect of ERP that we normally do not think about, and that is the relationship of dates and times in ERP. Seems obvious, but time is so integral to the usage of ERP, we don't often think about it. Let's begin with a discussion of our concepts of time. Time is described as the infinite continued progression of existence and events that occur in an apparent irreversible succession from the past through the present into the future. Aristotle contended that time is the most unknown of all unknown things. We can look at time in 2 modalities. We refer to these as the nomothetic and the idiomatic. Nomothetic refers to the study of general laws of science, as opposed to a whole. Idiomatic refers to a particular, a set of time, perchance measured hours, minutes. We'll concentrate on the idiomatic as that is what drives ERP. The unit of time, sometimes referred to as a midst, is any particular time interval that is used as a standard way of measuring or expressing duration. The basic unit of International System of Units is the second. This is defined by the 9 billion oscillations of the cesium atom, is defined by the system. It consists of the second. However, we don't use seconds in QAD much. Most common uses of time in QAD units are minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, quarters, and years. Humanity has used several methods and contraptions for telling time throughout history. Sundials are probably one of the first methods of measuring time. A sundial is a device that indicates a time by using a shadow caused by the position of a sun on a reference. A celestial or water clock is probably another old measuring device. It was invented around the 16th century and is a timepiece that uses liquid flowing in and out of a vessel to tell time. The hourglass first appeared in Europe in the 8th century. By the 14th century, sand in glass was commonly used in Italy and throughout Europe to measure time. A variation of the hourglass is the candle clock, where a thin candle with consistently spaced markings was burned, indicating the passage of time. In the 11th century, Arabic engineers invented water clocks driven by gears and weights. This is generally what we know as a clock. today. The first accurate atomic clock, based on that cesium atom, was built by Louis Essen in 1955 at the National Physics Laboratory in the UK. Time zones. In 1764, this gentleman, John Harrison, invented the first chronometer. A chronometer measures time accurately in spite of motion and varying conditions. So by the 19th century, the instrument had become a favorite with merchant marines. The Scottish-born Sir Stanford Fleming was the first to propose a worldwide system of time zones. Time zones are critical to the supply chain. If you've ever tried to coordinate a go-to meeting across several time zones in Europe, the US, and in Asia at the same time, it can be quite a challenge. With the advent of supply chain applications, this is becoming more and more critical in our considerations of scheduling. As we have seen, there is a long history of mankind making use of various constructions to consider time and dates. A calendar is a simple system of organizing days for social, religious, commercial, or business purposes. This is done by giving names to the periods, typically days, weeks, months, and years. A date is a designation of a single specific day within such a system. One of the most important tools to control and manipulate time in QAD or any ERP system is the calendar. We all use calendars in our lives to control schedules and plan what we're going to do in the future and how those relate to what we have done in the past. There are basically three calendar systems, normally based on either solar, lunar, or a combination as a lunar solar calendar. The Georgian calendar is the dating system that's used by most of the world. It's named for Pope Gregory VIII, who issued a papal bull in 1582 announcing calendar reforms for all of Catholic Christendom. Let's take a look at some of the major elements of time used in ERP. A year is the orbital period of a planetary body, for example, the Earth, orbiting around the sun. The year is typically 365 days, 366 in leap year, starting from the 1st of January and used to reckon time in ordinary affairs. Does everybody remember just recently, December 21st, we had the grand junction of Saturn and Jupiter. Good example of years. This was the closest since 1623 and the closest observable since 1226. Another example of year. Month is each year divided into 12 named periods. A period is time based on the same date in successive calendars, or a period of 28 days or 4 weeks. The origin of the word month comes from the ancient Egyptian that was studied and worshipped around the Roman supremacy. The months and how they were named is always of interest and a lesson in history. I'll leave this overhead for you to peruse at your leisure. Many of the functions at QAD are driven by weekly time buckets. A week is a time equal to 7 days and a standard period of time used for rest and work. Working days in QAD are Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Purchasing days in QAD are Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Again, names of the weeks are derived from history and mythology. Here we see an Italian cameo bracelet from the mid-19th century representing the days of the week. And here we see Dar, the Norse god of day, as he rides his horse in a 19th century painting by Arbo. Minutes are used in several QAD scheduling functions. There are 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 3,600 seconds in a 24-hour day, 7 days a week, etc., etc. There are also specific symbols used to denote minutes and time selections. Consider that the average lead time of a tornado warning, according to the National Weather Service, is only about 13 minutes. Holidays. A holiday is a day set aside by customer law on which normal activities are suspended. The degree to which activities are reduced are dependent upon local customs. Here we have a list of national holidays. Unique holidays for your company should be input and maintained in 36.2.1. 36.2.1 holidays are the days we don't work. Manufacturing orders should not be due, and operations never scheduled on holidays. However, if you want to, you can override that. In 11.15.9, area holiday, if you use service and support for several companies or countries in the field, you can use area holiday to specify locations. Duration refers to the amount of elapsed time between two events, the time during which something occurs. It's the theory of time that was first proposed by Henri Bergson. Henri was a French philosopher in the 1880s, and he said that determination is an impossibility, that free will is the pure mobility, which Bergson identified as being the duration. It is the existence of time and how we measure time. An example of duration in QAD comes from the line master, IN_duration_buffering. That is, the buffer duration is time stored in seconds associated with a product line that acts as a buffer for concepts such as wait, move, and queue times. An interval is a set of real numbers that contains all real numbers lying between two sets of numbers. In QAD, an interval is a code indicating an interval quantity that covers either discrete weeks or months, such as cycle count, average interval, or cycle count interval. Aging is simply the process of becoming older. I am old. We're all getting older. QAD uses aging, particularly in customer supplier consignment, as in the customer consignment functionality. Here we see an example in 7.18.11, aging inventory batch update recalculates in customer and supplier consignment inventory the fact that inventory has been in the possession of a consignee for X number of periods. The 28.17.11 supplier aging analysis, here we see a set of data that allows us to look at inventory by a supplier or an item. A horizon in QAD, horizons are the line at which the Earth's surface appears to meet the sky. In astrology, it's the great circle. In geology, it's a layer of soil or rock or strata. And in QAD, we can see in 2324, we have a MRP horizon. This is the horizon by which MRP is calculated, and anything outside of that horizon is ignored by MRP. We also see in the 2324 the order release horizon and the function of max dynamic time fence. Periods are defined as an amount of time, such as a period of 30 years or Picasso's blue period. There are many selections, 38 at my last count, which allow manipulation and definition of periods in QAD. Calendars in QAD can be defined across multiple levels. For example, domains, sites, product lines, and work centers. We define work days and shifts, and these are used for scheduling data in calculating capacity, MRP, and schedules. Calendars can be defined at multiple levels. Here we see domain, site calendars, product line calendars. Calendar work days and hours are established. Release dates are normally calculated based on these work days. A calendar must be defined for a production line in order to use the master production scheduling workbench. And site and work center calendars apply to work centers within a site unless a calendar has not been defined for that particular work center. In Sales and Operations Planning webinar, which we'll cover in April, there is 33.14, Calendar Cross-Reference Build. This links the calendar year to the corresponding physical periods in the general ledger. Operations Planning uses these links to display operation planning date in periods as well as weeks. The 731 Customer Calendar Maintenance uses to define the standard work week and holidays for customers and customer ship-tos. This calendar can also be used in the customer scheduling functions for creating customer plan schedules, customer ship schedules, and required ship schedules. In 5.5.1.1, Supplier Calendar Maintenance, we see basically the same functionality where we define the work week for the particular supplier, any exceptions to that normal calendar, and scheduled period shutdowns. The 11.13.5.10 engineer calendar allows us to define by engineer code, by engineer area, by skill, the schedule that allows us to define the visibility into engineering scheduling for parts availability, distance traveled, etc. In fixed asset calendar maintenance, this is used to set up calendars for non-posting books in the fixed asset module. Always be cautious of navigation in the fixed asset module. It's somewhat convoluted, so proceed with caution. Dates in control files in QAD determine the functionality and default of operation parameters for all modules in QAD. There are 109 control files in QAD. Not all of them have date parameters, but here we see exampled by 5.24 the field keep booking history. If you check that yes, then the system is going to keep track of all ORD.PO transactions which create purchase orders. You can trace that in 5.9.20 in PO change history browse. In the work order control file, 1624, we see a field called limit allocate to available. There are many settings in control files that are related to or influenced by the functionality defined in other fields. That's why we refer to the fact there's much study and application required to understand the full date functionality in QAD. In 1822-24 repetitive control, we see the parameters for advanced repetitive. The end effectivity date default method indicates how orders are going to be created. You can create them either by GL start and end period, or by calendar dates, or even set your own to cover some set number of days. In 7.1.24 sales order control, we see parameters for the control of allocate sales order lines in days, available to promise enforcement, shipping lead time values, ATP horizons. We can even have QAD calculate promise dates if we want to. The 36.9.6, one of the EE variations of the old SE control files, we see the value for the ability to vary pricing date by sales order line item. This allows us to have a separate price list on each line in a sales order. In 3.24, we see issue lines. You can specify the number of calendar days before the expiration of a data with a limited shelf life, and picking order, which establishes or creates picks lists based on either date or expiration of inventory. You can always choose locations and lot serial. In 36.9.10, the SSM accounting control, here again, financial controls for services support. Here we can see the parameters for period-based billing, prorate partial periods, last due date bill, last cycle date, last default cycle code, and start from warranty dates. The again, service support 36.9.10. Here we can see that field that says keep contract history. There's lots of places in QAD that ask you if you want to keep history. I would recommend yes, unless there's some network issue with space. Always say yes to keep history. You should review all 109 control files that relate to the functionality that you have in your instance of QAD. This is to ensure that those dates and time functionalities are set properly according to your environment. Daybooks. Daybook is a book of original entry in which an accountant records transactions by date as they occur. This information is later transferred to a ledger from which the information can be summarized into a set of financial statements. Daybooks in EE now are mandatory for all modules. Daybooks provide many advantages in terms of analysis, segregation of transactions, numbering, speed of period close, etc. Let's look at some transactional and maintenance dates in QAD. Most KPIs that we see regarding the functionality of ERP systems revolve around the date functionality. Creation dates. Creation date is the date the data was added or created in a table. Default is normally the system date, but you can have field security if you want to put security on that. In the transaction history, TR-HIS, there's a series of add.xx transactions, which allow you to track the add of forecast, sales orders, engineer orders, etc. The order date in sales orders are the dates that the entry of the sales order or work order, purchase order was recorded in the system. Take heed, this is very important to accountants and auditors, and they're very interested in these dates. Here we see the 7.1.1 sales order in the order date. Be cognizant of such things as revenue recognition, which are driven by dates. Due dates in QAD for sales orders, customer schedules, work orders, cumulative orders, flow schedules, production orders, requisitions, purchase orders, supplier schedules are critical to ERP as they represent the specifics of operations in the supply chain functionality. These, all dates, must be totally accurate and represent the reality of the supply chain and operations exactly if ERP is going to be able to execute and control manufacturing. Past due. Past due is defined as or refers to an action that has not been made by its cutoff date or the end date of its due period. Examples are if a borrow is past due, they'll usually have some sort of penalty or fee. Most people, customers and executives specifically, don't like past due. It upsets a lot of people. MRP doesn't like it. Don't let MRP be past due. Manage the past due. Required dates in QAD are dates that are stipulated as necessary to be done by, made by, or provided by. This is when the customer wants to receive the product. Pretty important. The promise date in QAD for items is the date the item was promised to arrive at the location. Commitment is important to the supply chain. Examples, spares, repairs, promise. These are all critical to the ERP system. Performance date is an optional date entered into the system, normally for some performance activity, either shipment performance or supplier performance. This has lots of factors affecting the promise date and is going to require constant update to remain accurate and timely. Pricing in QAD. We've covered pricing in previous webinars, and there's basically 3 areas that pricing covers: sales, purchasing, and service. The pricing date determines which price list is going to apply to a particular order. You can do that by order required, promise, or performance date. And you can set that in the default of 1.10.1.24 with the SO default pricing date. There's an expected date. If you use service and support, return to supplier. This is the date you expect to send the system back to the supplier. There's a need date. If you use requisitions in the requisition functionality, this is the date that the user or creator of the requisition needs the unit delivered. There is expiration in QAD. If you use shelf life, which is the number of calendar days that an item can be held in inventory before it becomes unusable, think COVID vaccine, you set the shelf life, and then in the 1.22.1, you've got 6 free-form definable user dates you can use, and the system will calculate what the expiration date is based on the create date and the shelf life. Just to bring to your attention, I'd highly recommend the QAD blog, www.qad.com.blog. There's this gentleman, Alban Bentin, who publishes a whole bunch of just great actionable item blogs. I reference you to the inventory expired and expiring blog he just published a couple of weeks ago. Very interesting. Here is a set of activities. One of the things that I've learned in my business supply chain is the control of obsolete material is very, very trying and cumbersome. This involves tools, plannings, issues of circumstances, and process. I'll leave this for your virtual perusal and let you come up with your own work instructions. In 3.5.1, obsolete inventory analysis, you can use this functionality to calculate the current inventory usage for a specific item type over predetermined periods. So that is very helpful and important to the finance and accounting side of QAD in terms of excess and obsolete calculations. The 3.22.2 transaction by item, this is the record of all the transactions that are entered, date, time, ship date expired, take effect of the general ledger is going to be debited based on the effective date of your transaction. You then use the 2515.2.1 GL transaction view to keep track or view the daybook codes, the posting dates, the system dates, the general ledgers, day and periods. And daybooks, as I say, are now primary mechanism interface between operations and finance. Receipt dates, the RCT-XXX, receive product either in work orders, sales order returns, distribution orders. These increase the perpetual record and normally indicate an addition to accounts payable. In the item master file, we have the date added and the average and cycle count intervals. Date added always seems to be of interest to the auditors. You want to know when parts are added to the item master file. In 1.4.3.5.7 and 17, you find the item site data, item inventory, and item planning database. Here we see all the lead times, which I'll speak about in just a second. In 11.3.7, we see the service item maintenance. And in service and support, as items are out in the field, there's a need to track the mean or the average failure and repair times. QAD provides fields for days between PM, mean time between failures and repairs, manufacturing mean times, standard time to repair for statistical analysis of field inventory. Lead times in ERP are critical to the functioning of scheduling. Dates reflect the existential change of circumstance and the need to estimate variation of respective elements over time to allow for the proper use of ERP. We have lead time elements such as the lead time fence, which is the Mrp Horizon, before which no orders are allowed to change. We have the lead times, inspection, manufacturing, cumulative and purchasing. We have HEP dates in terms of enforcement, family and horizon, and we have setup and run times. The 5 elements of manufacturing lead time define how much time it's going to take you to process a particular operation on a routing. It's divided into 2 elements, the operation lead time and the inter-operation lead time, setup and run, and queue, wait, and move. Impact on CRP. In the product structure, which was first invented back in the 1960s by IBM through the use of the BOMP, this defines the parent component relationship. And here we see the start date of that parent component relation and the end date. This is going to give you the ability to use the 13.5 to control most of the scheduling that you'll see in ERP. You can also offset lead time component on a specific parent component relationship. The 14.5 Work Center allows you to define time periods, number those periods, calculate dates, calculate horizons. The 14.18.4, you can define shifts, start, productivity, apply patterns of dates to that. The 14.18.4 work order calendar exception allows you to even put exceptions by shift for scheduling within ERP. The 14.13.1 routing maintenance, very similar to the 13.5, a start and an end date to allow you to control the actions of CRP. Can't be overstated enough with that. Allocations. Allocations are defined as uncashed stockroom receipts. They are either general, have a ticket, or detail, have a specific seat on the plane. Dates can be a very important part of the execution of material in the future and current status. Please review this matrix as allocations can be somewhat daunting to execute properly. Let's talk about customers and suppliers. Customers and suppliers require a 36.1.4.3.1, a business relationship create. We will cover that in a webinar discussion in March of this year. The 28.20.1.1, besides customers, suppliers are probably one of the most important elements of your supply chain information. Here you define the accountant, the payments, the banking, defaults, tax information, comments, and withholding. In 2.3.1, which is the old version of supplier data maintenance, which is still required for verification in the EE side of finance, you see the dates of the supplier maintenance. You also have 1.19 supplier item maintenance. Here you define your item to their item. You can define the supplier lead time and the quote date. If you have those available, you can create purchase orders with that automatically. So the supplier item works with purchase orders, blanket orders, and schedule order maintenance. Here we see in 5.7 the order date, the due date, and the day book on the header. And within the line, we can also set the due date, the performance, and the need date for a purchase order. We've talked about purchase orders and blanket orders in the past. Supplier schedules are probably the most flexible way to place orders with your vendors. We can deal with ranges, duration, intervals, whereas purchase orders are just part number, quantity, and date. The supplier control, 5.5.1.24, you can set and create releases based on dates, and you can have either one or zero or multiple zero schedules for the supplier schedule function. In 5.1.13, supplier scheduled order maintenance, we see start and end effectivity dates for those supplier schedules, order revision dates, and again, daybook sets. We talked last month about supplier portals. This is a communication tool to assist suppliers and customers exchange data and transactions to optimize scheduling and invoicing. If any of us have noticed, or did you notice that QAGS last week bought a new product, Allocation Network, GmbH, extending the capabilities of strategic sourcing and supplier management. So this is a new tool. We'll be interested to see how QAD incorporates that. With the increase in outsourcing manufacturing due to COVID and multiple disruptions, subcontracting is becoming even more critical. It starts off with the work order. It creates the order dates, the release dates, due dates for parts, issue parts to it, and you can tell the routing system how long it's going to take, what the queue, wait, setup, etc. are for those subcontract routing statements, and then you create a purchase order that allows the vendor to actually charge you for the value add or the product. Again, with customers, you have to create the 36.4.3.1. Again, we'll talk about that in March. 27.20.1.1, the opposite side of the supplier, critical to the ERP system. Make sure that these customers are correct. They're referenced in quotations, orders, schedules, invoices, accounts repetitive. 2.1.1, customer supplier, just like 2.3.1, this is the old SE. We still have to have the 2.1.1 to validate customer data within the EE side of finance. And then the 1.16, similar to 1.19, you can put their part numbers on sales quotes, sales orders, scheduled orders, etc. Demand dates in QAD drive the system. Sales orders by order date, customers with required ship schedules, customer plans, ship schedules, sequence schedules. We have forecast allocations. These all drive demand in MRP. 7.1.1, order date, required date, promise date, pricing date. Then in the freight section of sales orders, you can manipulate the allocation. Again, I reference you to that little matrix. Study that, understand how those allocations work. And now, as companies are becoming to use service and support more and recognizing that this is a alternate way to generate revenue, they're starting to talk about warranties. So you can input the warranty code. This helps track warranty cost estimations, helps the finance department to establish warranties. The 7.3.13 customer schedule order maintenance. Here you can set weeks offset, include Saturday and Sunday transportation dates. There are some date functionality in QAD is a little conspicuous. For example, this one, authorized number of unique days. This helps with the customer schedule. You can set that in 7.3.13. 7.13.1, pending invoice maintenance. We're all familiar with that. This you can use to maintain invoices and pending invoices with order date, required date, due dates, and promise dates. Forecasting. Forecasting drives the MRP system by date period by quantity. You can also use 22.9. Build seasonal relationships by date with seasonal inventory to have amounts in inventory as of a specified date. Dates on work orders, order date, release date, due date. You can set expiration dates on work orders. The routing data allows you to have start and stop due dates, your queue times, your run times, subcontract lead times. And in the accounting close process, this 1621 is critical, as that effectivity date takes the variances from your work orders and drives those into the general ledger. Advanced repetitive, start and stop, like I say, discrete work orders are part number, quantity, and dates. Advanced repetitive cumulative orders are producing an item during a period with a variable quantity. We'll talk more about that in May. Transaction dates, there are basically three primary types of transactions: ISS, RCT, and TR, which update the install base or the perpetual record. And you can measure that perpetual record by transaction date, expiration, and effective date. Remember, the perpetual record is a continuously updated quantity on hand and the audit trail that got it there. In 3.1.1, you can set shelf life and expiration date on specific items and lots and sites and locations. The 3.4.1, 2, 3, and 4 deal with your transfers of product. Again, based on the effective date, it's going to hit the general ledger. And for some reason, accounts always want to see this report at the month end, the evaluation of date as of, very important to the accountants. Cycle counting is somewhat convoluted, requires intense involvement of accounting and warehousing to look at the last count, number of items past due, to get your cycle count print and results update. If you don't, then you're going to use a physical inventory, and there you would use the 36 or 3.16.21 inventory balance update to update the quantity on hand. MRP is the original enterprise program to be driven by dates. Orlick and Plossel invented this in the late 1960s with the bump, and it is the time phase explosion of the bill of material. Here we talk about the Mrp Horizon, calculated by the 13.12.14, the cumulative lead time roll-up. This is the basic Mrp grid. We've gone through this a number of times. I'll refer you back to several of my webinars. And this is Mrp, and it is the time phase explosion of the bill of material. Gross requirements, scheduled receipts, projected quantity on net requirements, due dates, order dates, promise dates, start dates. These all bode that you understand how and why MRP works. Capacity. In capacity planning for every level in the ERP system, you need a corresponding capacity level: resource requirements planning, rough cut capacity planning, CRP, and shop floor control, because a plan that exceeds capacity is not going to be built and will build inventory. In 24.1, we can recalculate the capacity plan based on release date or due date, and then use 24.14 to show us a visual of the work center capacity, the load, the over and under, and the cumulative load for a work center. EMT is designed for companies that use ERP as their main system and have a central entity that receives the orders and multiple production or distribution entities that fill those. We'll talk about that in July. In August, we'll talk about DRP, that is used to manage movement of materials from a manufacturing site to a distribution site in a single company. And then in April, we'll talk about sales and operations planning in Q80. In service and support, you basically have the call, which is the primary tool for recording activities in service and support. There you've got the call activity recording and call invoice recording. There are several dates and fields that assist in the tracking and recording. I'll let you read through those. The 11.1.1.13 CAR allows accumulation of parts used, labor, expense applied to those call events. And then 11.1.1.15 allows you to invoice the customer based on your daybook set. The install base, which takes your customers, end users, and relates those to the individual items. You have the install base maintenance with the date it was installed, the warranty, last, and next PM dates. You've got warranty types, which you can define by duration, response time, start, in, mid, start, mid, within the horizon. In 5.11.5.1.13, you have contract, maintenance, billing cycles, order start, and end dates, tax dates. You can define the prorated periods, the period-based billings, the next billing. If you cancel, it'll keep track of that date. In 11.7.1.1, you've got RMAs for product coming back and returning to customer out of the install base. Here in 11.7.1.1, you can, again, manipulate the allocation of those. You've got the RMA receipt line. You've got the RMA issue line, shipping product back to the customer. And then finally, we have the 11.7.3.1 for products returned to supplier. Here we have the return to supplier line with its expected date and the required and received date for the lines received from suppliers. So, takeaways. There's lots of places in QAD that require lots and lots of information, quantities, dates, times, etc. Luckily, Alex and 32Soft have a whole series of loaders that assist in this update process. We're all familiar with Excel spreadsheets, and they use the Excel format to get data into and out of. There's always a 60-day complimentary trial for those, so that you can prove to your management that they are cost effective. There are over 49,000 field-to-table relationships in the ERP functionality code. It's helpful to be able to relate those specific fields to others with the same name. You can have IT create a quick progress program that outputs to a text file, and then you can look at those relationships in row column format. Dates play a critical role in processing ERP data. From the establishment of calendars to the transactional dates to order and operational periods, the correct statement of time and control over dates in ERP will significantly contribute to your improved use of your QAD ERP data. Denise, I'll turn it back to you. We hope that you have enjoyed this little review of date functionality in QAD. We wish you a wonderful 2021, or at least better than 2020. Denise, back to you.
Thank you, Don. Informative as always. Training, we do get a lot of questions about training, and yes, we are happy to help with your training needs. Since 2019, we've had 665 trainees among 23 custom training sessions. So give us a call or shoot us an email and we can get the training conversation going. Let me see, I think we might have a question. We do actually have a question, so we'll take a brief pause here. And Don, the first question is, any customer using the obsolete inventory analysis menu?
I am not aware of any specific customer that is using that, but I've looked at the functionality, and if anybody's dealt with bean counters and accountant people, one of the big issues with them is excess and obsolete inventory. And this 3.5.1 menu in the EE version of QAD has some pretty neat tools. You can set different types of inventory and let the system calculate how many days on hand you might have. It's quite an effective set of functionality for addressing that particular issue of excess and obsolete, which, like I say, accountants are always interested in because they have to reserve for that, and it's going to affect the balance sheet of the organization. So I'd recommend that you go look at that that process. But I don't know of any particular companies that use that at this point.
Okay, great. That does appear to be the only question, but if anybody thinks of anything between now and when the replay is published, just send along or give us a call with your questions and we'll get those answered and added to the page when we get the replay published. Let's take a quick look at upcoming webinars. This is a little bit different than what Don just said toward the end of his presentation. On February 24th, Don will cover supply chain control towers and end-to-end solution from source to make to deliver. But in April, instead of March, we will have the intricacies of QAD's business relations, which in EE is an intricate web of interconnected records. I just want to note that just before the webinar, today's webinar, we did push business relations from March to April. So any of you who are registered already should receive the reschedule notification. If you'll please check your spam folders if you haven't seen it, or just give me a holler and we'll get you taken care of. And the reason we needed to free up March is because we learned the QAD user groups are intending to join forces again to host another virtual conference. And these are the dates we understand that they're targeting. The fall virtual conference was a first last year, 2020, and it was a great event, information-packed and fun-filled. So if anyone didn't attend that, I would really encourage you to participate in the spring event if at all possible. And hopefully you can join us for our upcoming webinars and the conference as well. In fact, be sure to get each of these events on your calendars, because along the lines of how dates drive data, schedules drive action. And what gets scheduled gets done. Thank you. I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today, and hope that everyone's 2021 is off to a great start, and also ask Don if you have anything else you wanted to add. We don't have any additional questions, so we can go ahead and close out, Don.
No, just wanted to thank you for your attention. As I had indicated, dates in QAD's ERP system are pretty important. And there's a whole bunch of different kinds of dates. There's different concepts. And in order to make the QAD ERP system operate efficiently and effectively, you really need to understand and pay a lot of attention to updating and keeping those dates accurate. So if you have any questions at all, again, shoot an email to Denise or Alex or Nancy or I, and we would be more than happy to assist you in any date issues you might have. So thank you for your attendance.
Absolutely, and anytime. And thank you, Don. From all of us at 32Soft, everybody, have a great day. Take care.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.